introduced by the former voice of Parramatta Stadium, Rowan Barker too, so it's one of the great voices of the region. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. More formally, before I talk about the presentation, a couple of extra thanks. Some, not offend some, but some in the room who with us. I know the current member for Parramatta and the former federal member for Parramatta, my father, just entered as well. I wanted to pay particular reference to my friend and Western Sydney hero, Denga Dutt, who's up the back there, the star of the Western Sydney Unlimited campaign. As the ad said, in regards to his life as a child refugee from Sudan, the UN got him out and Western Sydney took him in, and we are so damn proud of you, sir, and he'll soon give birth to a young child born and bred and raised in Western Sydney. So Deng, congratulations again, sir. He is a proud graduate of this university, and I proudly sit on its board and the advisory board of the Academy. You'll see our student volunteers today from the Academy here at Western Sydney, 3,000 plus students in an elite program across every discipline, the future leadership cohort of this region. If you get your chance and they sidle up to say good day, give them 5 minutes to talk about their vision for the region. And also at morning tea, spend some time talking to the kids from the wonderful Mount Druitt TAFE cooking school, food school, that are giving our morning tea. The two institutions together, TAFE Western Sydney, South Western Sydney, and the university, literally are in charge of a very precious future of this region, and we're delighted they're both partners of us today. What a better place for big ideas for this region to be held in this very campus here and in the many campuses of the university across the region. I also particularly wanted to just comment on the last session. As Rowan said, when you think sewerage, you think in Western Sydney, it wasn't London 200 years ago. It was Gough Whitlam bought the sewer pipes in the 70s. For all of Gough's legendary social policy advantages, he's best known here for laying the sewerage. And it's a timely reminder to all of government what really matters to communities is often not the high and mighty, but about how you flush the dunny. And it is, as Tim spoke about and as Angus spoke about earlier, the use of big data of how we can make better decisions about Western Sydney really is important, and hopefully we can be the region that leads the use of big data in public administration as well as in private investment decisions, because that would really make us stand out. But lastly, from that point, and you heard both Parramatta Council and South West Sydney Health, two probably early adopters of that. But lastly, I want to thank my patrons who are here today from the dialogue. Cameron Klein sitting down in front, the former CEO, Managing Director of the NAB, who started the crusade using NAB data with Quantium, that data revolution. Very, very proud hearing how it's now going to change communities, not only how to make us all take, better example of who's got a home loan with the NAB, and the way it has grown. It came from that original data set, which has helped Peter Shergold, the Chancellor of the University, who's with us here. Also, most importantly in my view, firstly the new chair of the Western Sydney Airport Community Forum, and most importantly, again, leading the crusade on behalf of the state government so that we can welcome more than our fair share of Syrian refugees who are coming under the government scheme. And the great Kerry Schott, the chairman of Moorebank Intermodal, the chairman of almost every bit of infrastructure in Australia, and one of the great champions of our organisation. So, onto our vision for Western Sydney. It is legendary. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we kicked off the dialogue, and we've done our best to try and kick a few goals in the meantime, very much focused on playing catch-up on the economic and social infrastructure of the region. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition, Luke Foley, has just joined us, a Mr. Official thing. Thank you, Luke. We've spent a few years now literally playing catch-ups, how we can throw ourselves, and we'll see some of the achievements we'll take least part credit for, throw ourselves into some of these debates. Stadiums here, airports there, Warragamba Dam and others, and as well in cultural facilities. Hopefully we'll get the Premier today to reinforce, as her predecessor did this time last year, about the powerhouse as well. And all of the many challenges where we're in social and economic policy, we've tried to make a voice for the West, to stand up, to join with our collaborators across the region, to say it's not okay that the inner city, the North Shore and the eastern suburbs holds all the power economically, culturally and politically. And we've, I suppose, been party to having this region now at the centre of national debate, at the crux of national politics. Over the next 2 years, a state and a federal election, again, will be decided here in this very region. Long way, with all respect to all politicians, long may we always remain a marginal area, because you get a little more attention, and lobbyists like us can try and wedge that to our advantage. But we want to look towards the future. When you talk about Greater Western Sydney in any part, you need to start by defining it. We're expansionists in our view, just like the region itself. We have the bigger view of Western Sydney. That's Olympic Park to Katoomba, from Windsor to Wallandilly, we see as being part of this greater Western Sydney. Many elements and distinct elements, we don't see it as amorphous mass. Unlike other parts of, there's many views. If you ask Gus Gould, the great super coach at Penrith, he believes it starts at Blacktown and ends at the Nepean River. Or if you ask most people in the city, they believe Western Sydney is out there, anywhere west of the Anzac Bridge. So our definition is important in data planning. I think it's the same definition Quantium have been using, that broader vision of greater Western Sydney. So we're talking about a program leading towards 2050, GWS 2050, that will look over the horizon, not only doing the catch-up of today, but how we plan for the future. How will we continue to do it? Our team's already started. Our team isn't huge. It's three dedicated policy gurus in our office, Adam Leto and Luke Turner and the wonderful Lauren Stanley, who's part of the WSU Academy, who's recently joined us, that is starting to look above and beyond the horizon. How can we plan the corridors of the future? How can we train the leadership cohort of the future? How do we bid for the events of the future, rather than just how do we play catch-up that we've had to do because of the huge infrastructure backlog? We'll continue to do that through forums like this, through boardroom dinners to major seminars, to regional roundtables with public sector agencies, to working closely with the Greater Sydney Commission, the Federal Department of Cities, the local government, and with the landowners, to make sure we can start to look beyond the horizon so we don't have to play catch-up again 50 years because of the population boom that's coming our way. There's 6 pillars there we're talking about: the connected city, a productive city, a livable and sustainable city, a smart and savvy city, a well-governed Western Sydney, and a very cohesive and equitable Western Sydney. And they're all very important. We are not just an economy, we're also a society, and trying to link those two is, I think, the very essence of public policy and good corporate planning. The first one, the connected Western Sydney. It's all, when you're in Western Sydney, we grew up as a kid in Parramatta on the old Carlingford train line, had two trains on a Sunday trying to get to the city to change at Clyde. It does tend to dominate your view about transport. That was nothing compared to the people who grew up much further west, southwest and northwest, who still struggle. We can't have more Oran Parks allowed to be developed with no rail lines. We have to move ahead of that. Things like the north-south rail line we're promoting through the city. Extension of the light rail. The second airport for Badgerys Creek. We're not content with just getting one. Why not build 2 and get ready for the expansion? A fast rail up the east coast through Western Sydney to link Newcastle, Parramatta and Canberra and beyond. Droves and autonomous vehicles. Why not have Western Sydney as the trial centre? New suburbs opening up. Why not start by putting some trial autonomous vehicles in those new suburbs, contained areas, so the governments can assess the impact, the regulatory and legislative impact. And let's get next generation internet coverage, or in some parts of Western Sydney, any internet coverage, so that we can make sure we're not left behind in the information superhighway. But we also need, that leads to a productive Western Sydney. We know there's a 300,000 jobs deficit already. We want that to shrink, not grow. We cannot grow Western Sydney's residential community and not grow its employment opportunity. And not just jobs, any jobs. We want smart jobs, or why we were so strongly supportive of the airport. We have to see the region help it transition from the traditional manufacturing to the new smart industries of advanced manufacturing and tertiary. Health and education, we'll talk about later today, as absolute drivers of the new urban growth, the smart jobs that come, in fact, all of the jobs that those institutions provide. And why not aim for our own World Trade Centre? Why not think about more suburban downtown, less of our traditional business parks, and more downtown development? But beyond a productive city, it's a livable and sustainable Western Sydney. We have to stop thinking about, and we will lead a charge to stop us thinking about urban amenity as a nice little cherry on top. Safe streets, good lighting, great coffee, good arts, open spaces, walkable cities are the very key to attract the millennial workforce that we need to drive Western Sydney. We cannot just think about a little, tidy town program as a nice little thing in addition. We want federal and state governments to work with local councils in a competitive bid process, maybe run by the Commission or Infrastructure Australia, to reward cities who are prepared to invest in their own amenity to attract jobs, smart jobs, to the cities of the West, who want to bring them downtown, right up, not out, in Western Sydney. We want to develop the nighttime economy. We also want to have the places more than just being just a jobs location, but a a true destination for tourism, events, for culture, where things like the powerhouse debate come right front and centre. I'll come back to the Games. And we want to help the Commission with their exciting new program in the green grid and blue grid of the West. We have to address the heat islands. We can't condemn Western Sydney to a 5-degree average increased temperature than our inner city relatives simply because of bad urban design. So we need to do something about that as well. But we need a smart and savvy Western Sydney as well. As I said, investing in the education of Western Sydney Uni, and apparently even other universities, of course, that are also targeting the West. And we need everything involved. We need to reinvest in TAFE. We cannot allow TAFE to continue to be seen to be the poor relative of tertiary education, not only to address and staff the infrastructure capital of the world, but for the many other disciplines available at TAFE. We need great working partnerships between, as our university has with TAFE in Western Sydney, more so to develop those opportunities. STEM and STEAM, putting the arts into STEM. I'm told STEAM education. Of course, Science Park, the wonderful Science Park Celestino has out at Luddenham, will be the first STEM school in New South Wales in Western Sydney. The second STEM school in New South Wales will be in the Hawkesbury, sponsored by this university as well. So we've got to jump already. We have to maintain that momentum. And we've got to invest, all of us, in mentoring and leadership for the next cohort to come through. You know, I'm still trying to get baby boomers off the stage before Gen X can have a go. But if so, we've got to move along, shuffle along quickly, because Gen Y and Z are following and they're impatient, trust me. But we need to try and help smooth the path. And let's think about a brand council. Adam Leto and Amanda Brissot and others are leading a debate this afternoon in the breakouts about the reputation of the West. We need to put in our own brand council to try and put the right imagery about our city. Not just a flowery PR one, a genuine image to tell our story properly about Western Sydney and the many subparts of the West. None of this occurs if we don't have a well-governed Western Sydney. And I plead to state government. We were one of the few voices out there proudly supporting your changes to local government boundaries. It was a bold, brave step that Mike Baird took, and I'm delighted that the Premier backed him up with the decision to maintain the urban reform. But it's not really reform yet, it's boundary change. We can't expect Parramatta to truly be the second CBD and not give it a City of Parramatta Act like the City of Sydney has. We can't expect the great other cities of the West to be held back, to be linked with the little suburban councils, their CEOs and their resources they require, the planning regimes they require. Government needs to be a partner with local government. Don't treat it as the mendicant little brother or sister. Treat it as a true partner in developing and governing the region and give it the resources it requires. Here's a clue. Why don't we move state parliament to the West? If the commercial core is in the CBD, we're already seeing a centre of public administration growing in the West. Let me tell you, every lobbyist, every press gallery journo, the full economy that follows, and a great public building that the cities, Parramatta probably starts favourite, the other cities of the West put their hand up, bid to house the new Parliament House. You want to turn this city on its head, you want to change the thinking forever about what the West, if you want to get the public servants, all the CEOs based here thinking about our region, make them come to work here. Let's move Parliament House to Western Sydney, the single biggest short-term economic and best money move we could do to change the fundamental nature of the economy of this broader city. And we need also to recognise that we need to lead good public governance. We can't have the problems we've had in local government going on. We have to make local government, make lobbyists like me have to sign a lobbyist register for local government as well, not only state government. We need to get better governed cities, direct elect mayors, power to the administration to put budgets through and stop the stupidity that makes the Auburn councils and even in the past the Parramatta councils the joke of governance. We need to make the exemplary local government in the West. Lastly, we need a cohesive Western Sydney. It's not good enough to have tall buildings and skyscrapers and expanding, growing economies. We need a great society. We need to invest in the health and education needs and give equitable access to social service. We can't expect that the hotels of the city and the beaches be filled by housemaids who are travelling from Minto by 4 buses in the middle of the night without access to affordable housing. We have to solve affordable housing in this region. We cannot continue to condemn next generation of students in this campus and at TAFE to a life where they can't afford to live, where they need to work. 30-minute cities demand it, and equitable society demands it. And we, for one, won't shy away. This is not some fluffy PR exercise. We have to talk to our communities about radicalisation, about criminal use and drug abuse, about dysfunction and domestic violence. No amount of sugarcoating will hide the fact that we unfortunately dominate a lot of those areas, as long as health stats like mental health and diabetes. There's an awful lot to do here, and it's a grand partnership we need to build if Western Sydney truly will meet its potential as what it should be, the solution that Lachlan Macquarie thought about Western Sydney rather than the problem that others see it being. We have all the capacity here, the human capacity and growing the economic capacity, if we can harness those resources to an economic and a grand partnership of economy and society. We think that's our role. We're not a membership base, we're virtually a think tank with the nice support from some of our partners who allow us to go forth and independently engage with the community. We're not a chamber of commerce, we're not a community forum, we're a mix of everything that enables all those other collaborators to work with us as a conduit, and that's what we're committed to doing. Before I finish, there's one other thing we're committed to doing too. Why shouldn't Western Sydney host a Commonwealth Games? The Gold Coast can do it, even regional Victoria thinks it can do it. With respect, ladies and gentlemen, we already hosted one major event called the Sydney Olympics. It just should have been called the Western Sydney Olympics, because most of it took place in Western Sydney. So we started, and we thought having a bit of fun with it today, but this is a serious bid. We've got 90% of the venues already built for a Commonwealth Games, courtesy of our Olympic Games. We might use it to save the velodrome at Bankstown that's under threat. We certainly would celebrate the opening of the new Parramatta Stadium or Western Sydney Stadium for a rugby sevens. We'll have the ANZ Stadium reconfigured into rectangular, so it'll probably host opening and closing ceremonies, but with an expanded spotless stadium at the RAS across the road with the athletics track with 35,000 seats to accommodate it. We've still got the regatta centre at Penrith. We've still got the indoor sports halls, particularly at Olympic Park, and new ones coming at Homebush. And as we saw this morning, I think the next slide will show you, we've got Campbelltown by the Sea. There you go, there's the new beach lagoon. Crystal Lagoons will give us a Campbelltown for beach volleyball. There is so much opportunity for Sydney to come together to showcase Western Sydney. The great thing about this bid is we'll have a new airport open, ready to go for the 2026, hopefully, and certainly the 2030 Games, as well as Sydney Airport. 2 airports to service this Games. It might also allow the government, though, to focus, because this city does much better in project mode. We were great when the Olympic Games came around. We got stuff built we'd never have got done. I think one of the great legacies could be a new athletes' village we would need. And what a chance to either take on the industrial wasteland that's Camellia and bring that forward as an affordable housing legacy, or to redevelop, renew the great housing estates of Mount Druitt or Green Valley or Ayres. What an opportunity to not only celebrate the athletes of the world, what an opportunity to integrate and bring in the Commonwealth communities of Western Sydney, the great Indian communities, the Islanders, all of those who have a Commonwealth reach, the African nations, who will be part of this bid, and to pay homage to the great sons and daughters, sporting daughters of Western Sydney, be they Israel Folau in rugby, the great Betty Cuthbert, Ermington's finest, Orion Thorpe, who dazzled us in the pool, Michael Clark and Stephen Waugh in getting 2020 cricket back. This might be a bit of fun. It's a very serious bid that we should be launching. We're asking, we've already had some very positive response from the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition this morning. All we want is a business case. We're a business-ready region here. We don't expect it just for good fun or for politics. We want to drive the economic and social value, and we want to make sure that it ticks the boxes that Deloitte's and the Quantiums can do with data to make sure that we can present a great case to the world. Because to celebrate that airport opening and to show that Western Sydney really is ready, open for business, and it's getting ready to accommodate its expansion to 2050, I think it's the kind of project that maybe get us all together. I want to thank you for your support today. I want to thank you for your ongoing in advance support you're going to give us for this project, for GWS 2050. It's a huge challenge in a huge region and a lot to do, but we think it's incumbent upon us to look above the horizon, beyond it, not only to deal with the mess we've got today, playing catch-ups with the neglect we've suffered for 200 years. You'll hear later today from the Leader of the Opposition, from the Premier, from the Federal Shadow Minister of Communications, the State Minister for Western Sydney. You'll hear from regulators on stage here from Transport and Health and all other parts of our policy framework, and you'll hear from some of the private sector people who have to play to help it happening. I strongly encourage you after the break to get into the debate, be it in the panels here, in the breakout sessions, which will be even more fascinating. And most importantly, I've got to run the Q&A this afternoon. I want no more polite questions. I want real tough and rumble tough, rough and tumble debate, Western Sydney style, roll up the sleeves, Winnie Red's in the pocket, and let's get into the panel to really answer some questions about Western Sydney. Thank you and very much for your time today. Thank you for your commitment to the region.